One other thing that we've talked with some of the Christian guests that have come on is the belief in the life of the hereafter.
Okay.
And I asked two of the Christian guests that came on, they're like, just like how we believe, that the Bible got corrupted somehow.
Sure.
It was in its purest form, and to some Christians that might be offensive, and I understand that, right?
Sure.
But that's just a religious belief. To me, then there's some beliefs in Christianity that some Muslims might construe as offensive. For example, like a lot of Christians believe if you don't believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior,
Correct.
you can't go to heaven,
Right.
regardless of whatever it is that you do.
Correct.
And again, that's their theological belief, right? Like they're not bad people
Yeah.
for believing that. That's
Sure.
just what they believe, just
Not
like we have
attacking
our beliefs, right?
Yeah.
And so, what is Islam's perspective
Mhm.
on the hereafter? Because when the Christian guest came on the podcast, and I was like, if you were to ask me the question of if you'll go to heaven or hell, I'll
Mhm.
tell you I don't know.
Yep.
Because as Muslims, we believe for the most part that it's
Yeah.
up to God. You can even be Christian and technically still go to heaven, right?
Sure. Why
So
not?
that's right, right? You don't.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter what religion you belong to.
Correct. But there's a caveat there. Obviously,
Okay.
I'm gonna explain. So
Put
two
your mic a
things.
little
One
bit
is-
closer. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So two things. One is, in Islam, we believe hell is not forever. And I remember I was in high school. I shared this with my friend,
Right.
and he was like, "That's profound." I was like, "That's not. For me, it's normal. I grew up with this." The idea that hell is forever is non-existent in Islam. In fact, there's a famous saying of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi
Peace
wasallam.
be on.
What he basically says is that there'll be a day when the gates of heaven will just be kind of like rocking because of the wind. Meaning all of hell, the gates of hell will be rocking as if they're empty because there's nobody in them anymore. Eventually, everybody will go to heaven. Now, why is that? What's the background of that? We believe hell is like a hospital. The best way to understand our interpretation of hell is, imagine for a moment if you and I were to take two different paths. You would take the path of exercise, okay? You're going to eat well. You're going to wake up early in the morning, right? You're going to almost put yourself through hell, right?
Right.
Whereas an I decide, no, you know what? I'm going to enjoy life. I'm going to have donuts all day long, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to enjoy just a soda every day, and that's all I'm going to eat. I don't care. What'll happen? You will go through hell now, but you'll have a longer, fruitful life. You'll enjoy heaven
Right.
later, right? Whereas I'll enjoy heaven now, but I'm going to
Right.
have hell later.
Mm.
And what'll that hell look like? That hell will look like I'm going to get probably diabetes, right? Some heart disease.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in the hospital in and out, popping pills, right? Obese, a whole host of things. And my body will not be able to recover from my actions of so many years unless I go through some rigorous, and maybe I have, a host of other issues, right? So we believe that your soul currently, if I backbite, I'm damaging my soul. And it may not happen right away. I may not feel it right away, but it's slowly and gradually I'm destroying my soul to such an extent where now when I pass away, when I die, I go before God, and he's, the angels examine me. They look at my soul and they're like, look at this. The thing's all broken up. Guess what? You have to go to hell. What is hell? Hell is a hospital. Today, if you think about it, our hospitals are the most advanced thing ever, right? Our hospitals are the nicest, you get the nicest food, right? You get TV, you get a nice place to live. But nobody would willingly want to go to a hospital because it literally feels like hell. So that's exactly how we interpret our hell for the next life.
Unless somebody has really good insurance,
Even then, you'd be surprised. Even then, nobody, even if
Yeah.
somebody's really rich, nobody wants to go to the hospital.
Right.
They'll choose anything else. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But the hospital is the worst place to be. And so that's how we understand it. That the only reason bodies, or let's say our spiritual bodies, would go to a hell and why they would eventually leave is because they're going to have to go through that repair. And everybody can be repaired by God. It's just that who would choose, for example, a life of, fornication and adultery where they have STDs and say, I would love to have gonorrhea. Who cares if I have gonorrhea, right? Nobody would say that realistically. That I'm okay with gonorrhea, I'm okay with the treatment of it. Because everybody would be like, why would you want that life? That's the same thing we say now as spiritually. Why would you want your spiritual body to be destroyed and have to get repaired? Wouldn't you want to put yourself through hell now where you wake up early and you pray, where you're kind to people, where you're helping one another, you're not backbiting? Wouldn't you just want to do that now so that you have a more fruitful and enjoyable life? And that's really what it boils down to in terms of our interpretation of hell.
Interesting.
And so that is a pretty universal term, whether you're a Muslim or Christian or Jew or
This is a Muslim belief.
The Muslim belief, yeah.
Yeah, very,
But
yeah.
do you guys hold this belief with, I don't know, Christians or Jewish
Oh,
people?
okay,
You
yeah.
know
So,
what I'm
to
saying?
add to that, exactly. Okay, to your point.
Yeah.
The other part of it is that we strongly believe that I cannot dictate who's going to heaven or hell. I cannot. He cannot. Nobody can. God decides based on the circumstance of that person. Now, what that means is, let's say Ibrahim, for example, is on an island, isolated island. And the only thing that ever arrived to him, and I've lived on islands, so I know how this works, where if anything arrived to him, only thing that arrived to him is Christianity. God will judge him based on the understanding of Christianity that he has, and if he's lived his life to the best Christian that he possibly could. Because he'll be judged based on what he knows.
Right.
Now, if I've went to him and I've introduced to him Islam, like genuinely, not I've introduced him, I'll walk away, which I've had experience with some Christians as well. They'll walk up to me and say, I've given you the Christ, and they'll walk away, you're going to hell now. I'm
I
like,
see.
wait, what?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
slow down here.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if I genuinely tried and you've genuinely understood it, but then you say, no, I don't want it. I disbelieve in whatever you're saying, then God will judge you based on that you haven't embraced Islam. You know what I mean? But that burden is on our shoulder as a Muslim to make sure I convey that message. It's
I
not on
see.
your shoulder. Obviously, your shoulder, if you're finding God and pursuing God, you should look for him. But genuinely, every single person will be judged based on their own circumstance. Period. Hands down.
And tell me if I'm mistaken again, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
even after heaven and hell, we believe the ultimate final state of human souls is heaven, right? Like at
Yes,
the end of the day, eventually everybody will
Correct.
go to heaven.
Correct. Because that's the end goal. The end goal, according to the hadith or the sayings of the Holy Prophet, on whom be peace,
Peace
was
be on
that
him.
we have been created so that we can recognize our Creator. That's why we were created. What that means, though, is a bigger purpose here that exists. And so, in order for us to achieve that bigger purpose, we have to eventually be in the company of God. Now, our version of heaven is not like what everybody else thinks that they read. Just everybody's chilling and relaxing, and some nice milk rivers and whatnot. What we believe is that even in heaven, you'll be doing work, because we are created to enjoy life when we're working, when we're doing something, we have action. Sitting around all day long, you actually get exhausted. You get mentally, unstable and so many other things. So we believe that when you go to heaven, there are actually degrees in heaven that you'll also exist. The different 7 heavens, for example. And then within heaven, you'll be able to go up and you'll be able to get closer. And there's still more progress at hand. This is just the initial test to get us into heaven.
And this is in the Quran, it says.
This is this is all over the Holy
Interesting.
Quran and the Holy Prophet. Yeah, saying.
So let's say like I go to heaven, somehow I end up
Mhm.
there. yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow, God forbid, I end up there. I go on level 4, right?
Okay.
And if I keep messing up, can I go to can my level be lowered? Is that
So
possible?
the craziest thing is I can't tell you. That's the beauty of it, right?
Right.
I'm not gonna profess to know, but from our spiritual guides, in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, for example, they have explained that, for example, one thing that they've explained is that your physical body, when you die, it stays here, and your soul becomes your new body, and that soul has within it another soul that will be born. Okay, and within that soul, again, you'll get to start fresh, and you get to start from there. But because your current soul becomes the body, that's why they say you have a white sheet, like a beautiful body, but it's been damaged, so now it looks black or dirty or messed up. That's exactly why if your soul is damaged, you'll have that very clearly apparent in the next life. But beyond that, once we enter, we believe there'll be a day of judgment. God will decide where we're going to be, who we're going to be with. And then beyond that, we have no idea what's in store for us. It's up to God. I haven't been there. I haven't come back and let you know.
So, I do have a question. Going
Sure,
back
sure.
to like the hospital anecdote.
Mhm.
So you go to hell, and then you're in this hospital of hell, right?
Sure.
And does God then, in according to Muslim, does God then touch the person in hell to try to fix them, or how does the repair happen?
Same way a hospital currently does it, right? Where a doctor will come and prescribe whatever it is. You
Okay.
need therapy, you need physical, whatever
Yeah.
it is. Again, I'm just giving you scenarios. We don't really know, but
yeah.
the idea behind our belief of it
Yeah.
is that when you go there, if you because of backbiting, you have a certain damage, there's going to be a certain remedy for it. Just
Okay.
like in this life, for example, many of us will commit atrocities or just commit
Right.
sin. Even in this life, we believe, okay, if you fast, for
Yeah.
example, you can start remedying that body, that same spiritual body. If you pray early in the morning, or you give charity, or whatever those acts are that you can do, you can start repairing the body now. right?
I
So in the
see.
same way, there may be some exercise or something there
Yeah.
that exists in the next life.
And
It's
s-
possible.
this would happen before or after Judgment Day?
After
After Judgment Day.
Judgment Day. Yeah. So what we believe is that when you pass away,
Yeah.
you go into what is like a purgatory.
Okay.
Barzakh
Oh, you guys
is
do
the
believe in
other- so
purgatory.
we do believe in
Interesting.
purgatory.
Okay.
The only difference is that when you pass away, it's purgatory is like a window,
Mm.
and you actually see where you're destined to go,
Mm.
heaven or hell. Obviously, God still has the decision, but based on your condition, it'll show you. Like if you're going to hell, it'll show you you're going to hell, and whatever that time is of purgatory, you'll
Right.
notice it, and you'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to hell. I'm not in it yet, but I'm
Mhm.
going there." And then, of course, Day of Judgment happens, and that time, God can forgive anybody for any reason. He's the master that day. So that's another difference between Christianity and Islam, and this is actually the key difference. Most people don't know this.
Mm.
One of the biggest differences between Christianity and Islam is what is God's role on Day of Judgment. I'll explain. Christianity believes that God is a judge, which means that if you've ever told a lie,
Mm.
God has to punish you. He's a judge. He's bound by certain laws.
Okay.
And because he has to punish you over a single lie, this is why Christianity believes that Jesus, God's Son, had to come to the world
Right.
to die for your sins. Otherwise, God couldn't forgive you. So there's a limitation on
I
God's
see.
power. And that's why the entire story of Adam committing the first sin, Jesus coming to die for your sins, is all based on this idea that God is a judge and he's
Okay.
bound by the laws that he created. We believe God is a master. He's not bound by any laws. And as a result, you don't need Adam to commit a sin. It doesn't transfer from person to person. You don't need Jesus to come and die for anybody's sins because God is a master. He can see you. He can say, okay, you did, terrible crimes, or you were a sinner,
Mm.
but you were so kind to Ibrahim, for example. You fulfilled your responsibility as a friend. God can say, I forgive you. He has the
You're
ability
right.
to do
I
it.
understand.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What? So I'm really curious. I didn't know this until now. Actually, the
Okay.
purgatory idea.
Yeah.
I
We
should have
talked about this
known.
on a podcast before.
Yeah. And I think I said we don't believe in
Yeah, you said
purgatory,
we
right?
don't
Okay,
believe in
so
it.
thank God we have you here to clear that
no,
up.
no, you're good.
So the
You believe whatever you want to believe.
no, I don't want to spread disinformation. So let's say somebody dies tomorrow. He's a
Sure.
Muslim. So how long does to the person who died? How long does that process feel like until the day of judgment?
Time is created for this dimension that we're in.
Okay,
They will not feel any sense of time.
interesting.
It may be a day or 10 minutes, whatever. We don't know. But it won't feel like the way it does for you and I.
Mm.
And there are people technically in purgatory at this current moment.
Because one thing, I've been reading the translation of the Holy Quran more, and one thing God says repeatedly is, I'm giving you all these ideas of heaven and hell, but you'll never really understand it. It's
Right.
beyond your comprehension. Like,
Correct.
I can give you analogies, right?
Correct.
Like he does,
Correct.
gardens
Sure.
and whatnot, but we still can't fathom it.
Mhm.
So the purgatory, I'm assuming, has the same idea where we can't really fathom
Correct.
what it entails.
Correct. But the idea here is that whatever God describes in the Holy Quran about heaven, he's basically saying the enjoyment that you would feel, being able to drink a nice cold glass of milk in a hot day, that enjoyment is what you'll feel in heaven. It's not that there'll actually be milk and there'll actually, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just describing whatever those pleasures that you feel, you'll feel that pleasure again in heaven.
And I didn't know that in heaven you'll still have obstacles. So it's not like
Yeah,
utopia.
there's action. You're not just sitting around. Well, so the thing is, I'll give you an example. If you were to take a horse and tie him to a tree,
Mm-hmm.
after 2 days, he'll be fine. He's tied to a tree. But take you and I and tie him to a tree,
We'll
they'll
lose
lose
our
their
minds.
mind,
Yeah.
right? They're just sitting there, not doing anything. It's because we're social animals, right? We're created to be able to stay busy doing something,
Mhm.
some progress in our life. And so our version of heaven is the same. You're not just sitting around. You're doing something. Something productive, something engaging, something that'll keep us, excelling in one way or the other.
And in each one of the levels, it progressively gets more difficult.
We're not sure, but we know that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, for example,
be on him,
on whom
yeah.
be peace, is at the highest level. He's the
Okay.
closest to God, right? And then other prophets are in different levels.
Okay.
So some prophets are at 4th level and 5th level, so on and so forth. So they've done whatever they could in this life, and that's why they're in that particular level.
I talked to Ibrahim about this. I was like, imagine one day we are in heaven, right? And it ends up being the exact same place that we are right now.
That would be that'd be pretty intense.
Is that
That is
possible
pretty intense.
technically?
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
You'll never know.
that would be pretty intense, huh?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Something though that is also interesting to me is in the Quran it talks about it's not just life after death, it's also in the current
Correct,
life. Like
correct.
you can have heaven and hell.
Yeah.
And God can punish you or
Sure.
award you accordingly. And so
In this life.
in this life, like in the current life we're living,
Right.
like there's heaven and hell for people.
Yeah.
And so what is that? What are the nuances behind that
Okay, so
perspective?
good point. Actually, in Islam, we strongly push this idea that heaven and hell actually does start here.
Mm.
What that means is that, for example, there's a verse in the Quran that says, if you're blind in this life, you'll be blind in the next.
Mm.
And what it means is that not physical blindness, but spiritual. If you're spiritually blind, you haven't seen God, you haven't witnessed God, you haven't experienced God, don't expect that you die tomorrow and all of a sudden you're looking at God. It's not going to happen.
Okay.
You got to find heaven in this life, on this earth first. Once you find God and you do that, that exercise, then you can guarantee to enter the next life and be able to see God. So it's kind of an eye opener for all of us that we should be striving to find God, because that's our purpose in life. And if we were able to find him, guess what? We can enjoy that in the next life as well. But if we don't, and we're living like as if we're in heaven in this earth and we're not ignoring the real heaven, we're enjoying life, doing fornication and whatnot, we're going to miss out on that spiritual sight. And then the next life won't be as enjoyable. So it is really key to like focus on heaven and hell in this very life. And obviously when we're young, this is the Gen Z podcast, so
Right.
when we're young, we ignore that. We don't even think about death. That's just
Yeah.
not even, it's far away from us, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess the only thing Islam reminds people who are young, think about death. Death can come on anybody at any time. And if death were to come, and actually I spoke to somebody recently, he had some job interview or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but they had an exercise where they sat everybody down and they said, okay, take out a paper and pen.
Yeah.
And write down what you would like to see on your tombstone. Just like process that.
Wow.
Mm.
And then whatever that is, that'll be what you gave, what you've done in this life. What is that you want to see on there, right? And if you go back and look at a graveyard, for example, you'll see us
Yeah.
as father, husband, but those things are not what we're focusing on, right? We're focused on career.
Yeah.
Like it's not gonna say I'm a doctor of so and so.
They had him do this for a job interview?
Yeah, something. I don't
What
know
kind
what
of
it
job
was.
was he applying for?
I don't remember what the context
A
of it was. It
mortuary?
was a good idea,
Like,
I know,
yeah.
right? It was a good idea. I don't know what the context was, but yeah,
Right.
to that point.
I like that we have those set of beliefs because that makes you accountable for everything you do. So everything matters. Every single
Yeah.
deed you do,
Sure.
every single action you have matters. And to your point about being spiritual in your 20s when you're young,
Yeah.
when you're like in our generation, my grandma has this saying. She always says, everybody tries to find God when they're older.
Yeah.
Like everybody has, like when they're older, right? They become more spiritual
Yep.
because death is coming.
Yep.
But the biggest test
Yep.
is when you're young, you become more spiritual
Yep.
and you find God, because that's the age where nobody is
Yep.
looking for that.
Yep.
And if you find that, my grandma says, and I don't know if it's
Yeah.
true, but she says you can achieve the spiritual level of prophethood, like in terms of not become one, but
Right.
like you can reach that standard of piousness because
right,
you
right.
found God in your 20s when you were young,
Yep.
where you could have done anything you wanted because everybody else was doing.
You're ahead of the game if you're
Right.
able to find God when you're young. Absolutely. In
Yeah.
fact, most disciples of Jesus, Moses, and even the Holy Prophet were young people. When they joined him, they were young. Why? Because young minds who actually understand a movement and a mission, they're able to adopt it. But old folks are the ones who are strict and stubborn, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, at the time of the Prophet Muhammad,
Peace be on him.
on whom be peace, he basically said, we should not be burying our daughters alive. That was unheard of. Like, why on earth would you say that? Because they were so used to this idea that if you have a daughter, she's a burden. So the best thing is just once she's born, just bury her. And they would do this. It was a cultural norm.
Yeah.
And the Prophet said, are you guys crazy? Like, why would you do that? What you should be doing is you should be raising them. They are your paradise.
Mm.
In fact, through them, you'll get, success in life. So young people were like, that makes sense. This idea of burying them makes no sense. And so they started embracing his message and started following that way. So it is young minds who have that open-mindedness toward faith and towards that pursuit of God. They can get ahead of the game, but they can also be distracted.